So we were just starting, George, and we were talking a little bit about how APEN Action and Chinatown Coalition have put together a rally in support of the decision that Sheng Thao made to fire and let go of Chief Armstrong from Oakland Police Department. And just some background, this is something that has been left over as part of the federal oversight that's been happening to the Oakland Police Department for many, many years. We've gone through, I think, six police chiefs in the last, 10 years? And so it's ridiculous how quickly we're always turning over. Don't quote me on those numbers, y'all, but that we're always, more. Right? It's like we're turning over police chiefs almost every other year. And it's continually showing that, OPD is just this corrupt place. But what really, this specific case is kind of a holdover from our previous mayor, Libby Shaft, right? There was an investigation that started under her administration and rolled over into, Sheng Thao's new administration that just started this in January. So, and then instead of doing maybe what I think Libby Shaft would have done is just quick pro quo and allowed it to continue to get thrown under the rug and pushed again. Sheng Thao made a decision to, one, put him on administrative leave during the investigation, and then two, then ended up firing him, I think, as a result of some of the remarks he was making in the public about the case of his administrative leave. And so Deanne was going to start talking about, like, what was the rally about, and and that there's been these rallies that have been going on that are being organized by some folks who, and some of us see it as a way to continue to support a potential, a way to, they're basically pouting that Lauren Taylor didn't win the mayor position. Yep. So, Deanne, can you tell us a little bit about the rally and, like, who came together and why and all of those things?
Yeah. There was a lot of different folks at the rally. There was, like, Oakland Rising Action, OPA, APEN Action, Oakland Progressive Alliance, APEN Action, the OCIC, which is the like Business Improvement District, with like a coalition of different orgs in Chinatown. I feel like there was so many. Oh, and the Taishan Association, so like the community ambassadors that wear like orange vests in Chinatown. So we want to come. I mean, a really big thing is that, a lot of our elders and folks there's been a rise of, like, violence in our, against our community, in the Asian community. But also, we all just want to come together because we need accountability from, OPD and anybody that's supposedly, supposed to, just do their jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, bottom line, like, that just it, like, period, right? They should be doing their job. And so, George, like, what are your thoughts about it? I know that, the work that CURYJ has been doing over, like, so many years, right, around, police accountability, about the, the violence that the police bring to our communities. You work with families and youth that are impacted by the system, but also who are impacted by the violence and the murders committed by police officers here in Oakland and around the Bay and in the East Bay. So, like, I wonder what your thoughts are, just about where things are at.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe first I'll just begin by introducing myself for those who may not know me. My name's George Galvis. I use him pronouns. I am founder and executive director of CURYJ, Community United for Restorative Youth Justice, based in East Oakland, and also the Dream Beyond Bars Action Fund. So in terms of, my thoughts, I feel like Leronne fired himself, man. I don't think that there was really any other decision that could be made. You know, for those who know Leronne, like, you know, if you've had a conversation with Leronne or you grew up with Leronne because he grew up in Oakland, you know, he's a very personable person. He's a likable person on a personal level, but this ain't personal. This is about business, you know what I'm saying? And he demonstrated either one of two things, you know. I mean, when he was basically interviewed regarding, the misconduct, the two different misconduct investigations related to Sergeant Sheng, he basically said that, you know, he didn't know the particulars of the inquiries, which to me demonstrates if you're the chief, one of two things: either he's incompetent in his position as chief, or he's dishonest. But either way, he has to go. And the way he also responded publicly, pretty much, you know, he terminated himself because he responded both defensively and offensively like a child. It was like a child having a tantrum, you know. You know what I mean? And finger pointed to everybody else, blamed everybody else. But he was the chief. The buck stops with him. So if he's not able to take responsibility and then he attacks his boss, like, what employer is gonna maintain and keep him after that? You know what I mean? So, you know, Leronne fired himself. That's pretty much what happened. Leronne fired himself. There was really no decision that could happen after that. And the bottom line is if we ever want to get out of sort of this federal monitor, and we spend damn near like $1 million a year on federal monitor, you know, then we need to demonstrate some systemic fundamental change. We have to demonstrate something real. And Leronne's actions or lack of action really reflected more of this antiquated good old boy network, like a fraternity. And that's what that whole blue line, that's what the blue code, that's, you know, fraternal order of police, all that, that's what it is, man. It's a good old boys network. And regardless of abuse, it doesn't matter. They covered it up, they swing it up, they sweep it under the rug. You can do no wrong. And that's what Leronne reflected, and that's why we're under federal monitor, you know. And so if we're ever going to get out from underneath that, we need to have some bold leadership that's going to actually hold rank and file officers accountable. And so I absolutely applaud, I celebrate the bold decision by our newly elected Mayor Sheng Thao, for making that decision. It was the right decision, and she needs to be fully supported by our community for making it. It was not personal. It was in the best interest in the city of Oakland.
That's right. That's right. And if you all read the report, like I totally encourage everybody, right? Like to go out, read the report. But I think it's really interesting to watch sort of this counter rally, like, right? That it's like a lot of folks who, it's so complicated, right? Like folks who are coming together and really calling for Chief Armstrong to come back into his position. There's a couple things that I wanted to touch on. The first one, though, is around like who is there, like who's at this table, who's showing up. And when I look at the group of people, it's really communities who are really impacted by violence. Like we're all really impacted by violence in Oakland right now, right? And so when I think about like systematic, like the ways in which that the system really impacts our communities and how that type of like trauma can really impact the ways that we think our like solutions are, you know, can be presented to us. And so it's like, well, give him a chance. But at the same time, they're calling for the mayor who just stepped into her job, who just made this decision off this like long line of decisions that the previous mayor made, right? Like inheriting a city that has been, you know, doing the business of Oakland not so well for the past 8 years. And I say that very lightly, right? Like that they're calling for her removal. And it's like, because they're upset that one candidate didn't win. And they're using this as an opportunity to make that attack. And so like, I think it's really complex because there are communities that are really affected by the violence. They really want solutions. But I wonder, like, Deanne, I know that APEN Action and folks in Chinatown, like you were mentioning the Toisan Association doing the community ambassador work, Like, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think those are solutions that, you know, our community and, you know, our council member and council president, Nikki Fortunato Bass, really advocated for is some of those services.
Yeah, so if folks ever go to Oakland Chinatown and you see people in vests, well, there's like different groups. There's like the blue vest and the orange vest. You don't have to but you know, there's community ambassadors, and they're folks usually like volunteers who are you know, like walking the streets of Chinatown to make sure people are safe and just keep a lookout. Yeah, because you know, a lot of folks in Chinatown are really scared. It's really noticeable how people, like a lot of businesses are packing up early, and yeah, it's like really dead at night. So yeah, we have folks doing ambassador work. There's also a little bit of programming, because some of the ambassadors are also like building relationships with the homeless folks in Chinatown as well. The ambassador program, I think, is funded by Asian Health Services. So, you know, for budget work, we want to try to like get that funded as well.
That's right. That's right. And does Asian Health Services get that funding through Department of Violence Prevention, or is that just something separate that Asian Health Services went and like was really trying to build community, you know, build community safety, and went and got funding elsewhere?
Oh, I'm not sure right now, but I do think there is like government funding that goes into it.
Got it. Got it.
There was actually I'm sorry, I was just going to mention that there was actually a Stop Asian Hate event this Saturday, and CURYJ was very, you know, proud, honored to stand with our API relatives in solidarity in that. And one of the things I just want to acknowledge is, you know, what a beautiful and powerful example from our API community in Oakland around really investing in community-led solutions, and that concept when we say we keep us safe, because we know that the safest communities don't have the most police, they have the most resources, right? And so by really, you know, investing in like community ambassadors and what kind of opportunities, resources, services, and programs that we can really offer to our community and to others, I mean, we're really addressing root causes and, you know, and actually addressing real solutions. So I just wanted to add that.
I appreciate that, George. And, you know, I know that CURYJ is doing a lot of that work, right? Is doing a lot of community ambassador work, really doing, you know, that violence prevention work, and doing the de-escalation work that's in the community, and really meeting people where they're at. Davey D just joined us, but it looks like he's settling into his car. I know he's commuting back home from teaching class at San Francisco State, so let's let him get situated. Hi, Davey.
Hey, how you doing?
How are you?
Good. I'm, you know, good to see you all, and good to hear this conversation jumping off.
Yeah. We just I just want to recap. You know, we were just talking about this rally that, you know, the Chinatown Coalition held. We gave a little breakdown about where we are and how we got to this point. And George has been talking. George and Deanne have both been talking about like the violence prevention work, and that really brings community safety. I want to bring you in, if you can, when you're ready, to really just introduce yourself, and then although you probably don't need that much introduction. If y'all don't know who Davey D is, y'all need to know, and follow him on Hard Knock Radio. But also, just want to hear your point of view. Like, I think it's interesting to see the way that media has really picked up on this story, and the framing that the media is using. And I'm wondering if there's a counter narrative that you're thinking about and that you're seeing that's out there.
Well, I mean, there's a number of narratives that are out there, but if you're talking about the predominant narrative that Chief Leronne Armstrong is a popular chief, he was doing good work, he was unfairly fired, and a lot of people in the community are upset. if that's the narrative, it's an interesting one. There is some truth to it. He's very popular in a lot of circles that I'm around. But the popularity doesn't necessarily translate into one, love of the police, and two, making sure that wrongdoings are, taken into account and those who do them are held accountable. So, really the firestorm around Leronne is that he was fired. And there are many people who feel like that firing was kind of unjust. And I would push back on that in the sense of, to give some context, I think people need to read that report. The report that came out from the law firm. It's 57 pages, and then there was a number of recommendations. And what stood out to me in the report, above and beyond Leronne Armstrong, is how much resources were devoted to really unearthing the facts behind an officer who crashed a car and then left the scene. I mean, you had two sergeants go over to San Francisco and, look at it, and they interviewed a whole bunch of people, and a whole lot of time was spent on something that could have really saved us time, money, and, arguably for people who say that the city is short on cops, maybe their time could have been better spent doing the work that we think they need to do. But instead, they were trying to track down the facts behind the nefarious activities of an officer who is supposed to have a higher standard of conducting oneself, who just refused to, report that he hit a car in a garage.
An OPD car. He was driving
Felony
an
hit and run,
OPD
y'all.
vehicle.
Felony hit and run.
Yeah,
Right,
in an OPD vehicle.
So
Come on now.
The point that I'm getting at is that from reading the report, this goes beyond Leronne Armstrong, because as I'm reading this and I'm seeing this sergeant who is in the Internal Affairs Division and this officer who, is also of rank, all these people kind of circled the wagon, omitted stuff, didn't tell the truth. It was a lot of not telling the truth, right? And that says to me that is something systemic that goes above and beyond the chief. Now, we could debate whether or not the chief, who said he didn't know about all this stuff, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I think that's besides the point, because what we're looking at is something that was clearly systemic if you're just going by the report, and there's no reason to feel that the report was inaccurate because they have receipts, The other thing that I thought was interesting was in the report that they talk about the police using their own cell phones and then deleting messages after a period of time, which has hampered a lot of investigation. So that's problematic. And again, I think we have a right to be concerned about that because it's our tax dollars that pay for all this. And you're talking about an organization that uses, 40% of our budget, budget that could be used for a number of other things that aren't doing right by us in terms of just using, resources properly. So to me, that's pretty concerning. And then lastly, the fact that this officer Chung, I guess it's Chung, not only did he do the hit and run, but then he shot, a bullet into, in the building.
Elevator.
In an elevator by himself.
Right. And then, by his own admission, threw away the evidence. So let's put this also into context as well. You have a sister, I forget her name, that had a gun legally, who was being accosted, kids were being threatened, and she didn't want to kill the brother that was doing it or kill the person that was doing it, so she shot the gun in the air, right? And, there's all kind of rules and things like that. You don't shoot a gun in the air. Long story short, she got arrested, right? And there was a lot of people coming down her row talking about she was out of pocket, she shouldn't have done this, yada, yada, yada. We've had store owners who have in the attempt to protect themselves, had shot at people or brandished a gun, themselves getting arrested. So again, here you have somebody who we paid for through our tax dollars to go to the academy, get training. Here's a guy who is of high rank. You know, he's supposed to be leading the charge to stop crime in Chinatown, and was supposed to be taking over their drone department, you know, because I didn't know that we had a drone department, but there's a guy that's doing some big things, you know, making $500,000 a year when overtime and everything is included, who shoots a gun in a building and then doesn't report it and takes everything away, you know, tosses the evidence away. That alone should have been like, hey, man, you know, we're not asking any questions, we're firing you. But if you're reading the reports, you know, they got these powerful lawyers, the same ones that defended Johannes Mesley during the Oscar Grant thing. They were like, we refuse to let our client admit to things. We refuse to let him do this. We refuse to let him do that. And there was no real solid and demanding pushback. So bottom line, you have a systemic situation that, you know, goes above and beyond the chief. I'll close with this. The question that we have to ask, if you get rid of this chief, is the next chief going to be more responsible or not as embedded in the systemic problems that we see, that we saw in that report? I would argue probably not. And so, you know, I think you're left with, you know, who do you want to dance with? You want to dance with the person who you already know, or you want to try and figure out, you know, the habits and the types of steps that they take to cover up with somebody you don't know. So that's kind of the bottom line. But there needs to be some real fundamental change, which I just don't see coming on the horizon as far as the police department is concerned.
For real, that's for real. And I really appreciate your like breakdown of all that information and your perspective on that. And George, I'm wondering if you might want to respond to Davey's question, because
Yeah.
I agree. I don't actually think, you know, this department, I know that you might have to hop off.
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely agree. And I think that that's because the only real solution is to, you know, to dismantle the police, which means we have to begin to divesting from a strategy that has been flawed and failed. Like, if, you know, as community workers, we're always asked as nonprofit, community-based organizations to prove the absolute efficacy of what we do. Had we ever held law enforcement and incarceration to that standard, they would have been defunded a long time ago. And the bottom line is I work with the families and the frontline communities most impacted by crime and violence and policing and incarceration. And so we're the ones who oftentimes are the ones who have to bury someone when there is fratricidal violence in the community, or you know, other kinds of violence in our community happening, you know what I'm saying? And so what we need to do is actually invest, as I said earlier, in those community-led solutions. That's why I really applaud like the API community and what they've really kind of organized for. We know that the safest communities don't have the most police, they have the most resources. And so it is systemic, and that's why we have to begin to invest in those community-led solutions and address the root causes. You know, that's the only way we're going to see some improvement. And we need to all be concerned about the squandered resources. You know, we know that we spend about $1 million a year on the federal monitor, and then think about all the police abuse cases, all the settlements. Those don't come from the police budget. Those come from the city general fund.
Right.
And we're talking cumulatively about millions and millions and millions of dollars. You know what I'm saying? You know, so, you know, the other thing I want to point out is that it is systemic. What this officer did, you know, first of all, was a felony hit and run. But that is the culture of law enforcement. They think they are above the law, and yet they are the ones who are charged with enforcing the law. And so it's really problematic, and it's thought-provoking. It should be thought-provoking and frightening to people just how much power is given to these entities, right? And so he committed a felony hit and run, because accidents happen. Like, look, I've been in a car accident, you know what I'm saying? That's okay. You know, when accidents happen. But the fact that he thought it was okay to drive away, didn't even know, like, shit, that was his neighbor. Do you want to live next door to a police officer? Because I don't feel safer if I live next to a police officer, because that fool might hit my car or shoot his gun into my house and then try to cover up the evidence, because that's exactly what this pig did. You know what I'm saying? He committed a felony hit and run, crashed into his neighbor's car in their apartment garage. Then he shoots a gun in his employer's, in the office of his employer. You know what I mean? In the elevator, and tries to cover up the evidence. Well, what folks need to know is he committed a felony. Penal Code 141 makes it a felony for officers to destroy, to withhold, you know what I mean? Evidence. And so he committed a felony. So he committed multiple felonies. And then it just got swept under the rug. That's when I'm talking about that good old boys network that we've seen. And Leronne reflects that old, antiquated good old boy network. He claimed that he, couldn't recall, the particulars of the inquiries related to Sergeant Chung. Like I said, if he couldn't, either he's being dishonest, which is what the investigators believed, which means he can't be trusted, or he's incompetent. But either way, he can't be the chief. But to Davey's point, yeah, we have to stop actually trying to think that police are going to make us safer. We need to invest in those community-led solutions. Things like town nights, things like the Department of Violence Prevention, things like macro, you know what I mean? We need to invest in food, clothing, and shelter for our most vulnerable community members. We need housing for everyone. That's what's going to keep us safe.
That's what's up. Thank you. That's a mic drop, George, as always. I'm wondering, Deanne, if you could really talk a little bit about what are some of those solutions that you all are talking about in Chinatown, and what are the ways that you all are thinking about this issue? Because, I mean, one of the big proponents of bringing Armstrong back is Carl Chan. And, he is sort of a self-proclaimed, like, Chinatown rep, and I'm wondering if you all might be able to speak, a little bit about, like, what does Chinatown and the folks in Chinatown, what are you all hearing, and what are your members talking about, and what are community folks talking about in terms of this?
Well, I'm part of the People's Budget Coalition, and we want to put funding for community ambassadors. We want to do, we want to address the roots of crime, people aren't getting their basic needs met. So we want to get affordable housing funded, whether it's like more affordable housing. More affordable housing, and different, tenant counselors, like preservation of like affordable housing, or building more and like assisting folks. There's like a lot of stuff, and fully funding macro, and trying to really prevent crimes, and giving folks like different economic and educational opportunities.
Thanks. And yes, I see Nelson put in the chat, go People's Budget Coalition. Yes, to all that, right? Oakland Rising, I know CURYJ, other folks, Oakland Progressive Alliance, a bunch of our organizations, eBase and CJJC. There's a bunch of organizations that are really involved with pushing for a people's budget. And I mean, Davey, I wonder if you might want to talk. George, I don't know if there's anything, if you need to hop off, if there's anything that you wanted to say last before I move on to the question to Davey.
Yeah, I'm going to actually need to transition. Just want to thank you, Liz, for creating this forum and this opportunity to engage our community. Thank you to the other panelists. Good to see you, Brother Davey. That's the homie, and thank you to our API community leaders who have been really taking initiative. I said, as I mentioned earlier, around really the investing in We Keep Us Safe and those community-led solutions. And then lastly, I just want to applaud Mayor Sheng Thao. It was a bold decision, and it was the right decision. It needed to be made, and Oakland deserves bold leadership. So thank you, Mayor Sheng Thao. We stand with you.
That's what's up. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, George, for joining us. And I know you're so busy, so handle it. I think just kind of building off what George just said, it was a big, bold move. And I wonder your thoughts about that, Davey, in terms of that boldness, right? Because there is a little bit of a risk, like coming out that strong this early on in your mayorship. Oh, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, politics and the way that people perceive situations are based on relationships. And, we're in an activist community, so we all kind of share similar language. We have understanding. We also kind of made a commitment to deal with the consequences of the steps that we take. That's not all the way shared in a lot of circles that I'm at. Again, I want to emphasize, people like Leronne Armstrong. I like him. He's good people in terms of
He's a
having
nice
a conversation. But people like that guy, and you cannot discount that. If you do, then you run the risk of having a rift. And so, while we might be able to, break down the specifics and tell people to read the book, Darwin and what's his name, and look at all these systemic things. But, I'm also looking at people that's like, they robbed my house, they took my converter, I can barely make it, ain't nobody help me at all. Yeah, there's a violent prevention thing, but that don't do me no good for this upending situation that I'm dealing with. And we haven't had, from the police department, and even with us, an understanding of who's doing this and why. Are we talking about repeat offenders? Are we talking about an organized group of people that are being powered? I mean, for example, we know that in San Francisco there was like an owner of, I think it was Quickly, that was fencing a lot of stolen goods. That story kind of came and went. And the police didn't want to help when Chesa Bowden was the one that was like, look, this thing is very organized. Here's what's happening. You got somebody who has deep pockets that's paying folks to go out and cause mayhem in the community. That there was no follow-up. We didn't know how deep those tentacles went. We know that there was an organized racket in Fremont and an organized racket in San Rafael. How organized were they? Where did they get their money? What did they attach to? All that kind of went and, came and went. And so the face of economic hardship and inconvenience becomes, the young cats that you see, that, mask themselves up and then, carjack somebody or steal your catalytic converter and do whatever with no response from the police. So because there's been a PR campaign, a de facto PR campaign that has gone on with the chief and others, there are folks that earnestly believe that their solution lies in, that individual, and they base it upon the relationship that they have. The man had like over 120 meetings, in different neighborhoods. You can't discount that. You can't discount how it resonated with folks and what that means when somebody who they feel like they can reach out and touch is no longer there. So now the challenge is, how do you reassure people that things are going to be different, that we're embarking on a new path? Has Sheng met with 120 different organizations? What were those meetings like? What's her relationship with those communities? And if there isn't one, how do you establish one? Is it going to be her, or is it going to be the organizations like yours and, CURYJ and others that are, that are already doing that work, but are you in a position to scale up? That's the lay of the land that I see right now, and I think it's going to be a hard road for everybody to take. And then lastly, I come back, who's going to take his place? Because if you're talking about something that's systemic, are you cleaning house from top to bottom, at least in terms of the, the leadership command that was under him? Because all those folks were covering up, not saying things, lying, distorting reports and basically gaslighting everybody. So I feel if he goes, a whole bunch of other people need to go as well.
That's what's up, Davey. And those are lots of questions, right, that I think we're all kind of left with at this point. And I think those are kind of those are the next steps, right? It's in these moments, what are we going to do now? What's the next moment for the mayor? And I know that for the budget process, that we have to have a biannual budget that is approved by June 30th by City Council. And the mayor will be submitting their version of the budget, their first pass at the budget. And I believe they're going to be really using that race and equity department to incorporate equity framework into the budget itself. I know that was tried through the last budget process, but the mayor kind of circumvented a lot of those equity indicators. And so I know that this budget is going to include that. And her budget will come out by May 1st. And before that, there's going to be a bunch of community meetings in April, May, through June, right? And so there's going to be events that will be going out into the community. Something that also Libby Schaff always said she did, but rarely did, right? She would hold like maybe 1 or 2 public meetings. And so being able to really see the mayor make that commitment, I think we're going to have to wait and see. But that's part of the process, is like getting out there. There was a question in the chat, where can people learn more about the People's Budget Coalition? We're going to, it's a very loosely built coalition of folks that have come together. They do definitely have some agreements about how they're moving together, but this is something that comes together that is built off of it's called Refund Coalition, that I want to give props to ACE for holding down for many years. In the past, they used to be the conveners of that. They used to meet here at the Oakland Rising office together on a monthly basis. And so give props to that. Give props to Carol Fife, because she used to play a big role in Refund and its first formations of it. So so you know that when she's talking about the budget now as our council member in District 3, that she's really showing up, knowing on the community side sort of where community is coming from. But I just want to say that we'll be talking more about the budget in the next couple of weeks. Next week, we're going to be talking about OEA, Oakland Education Alliance, and where the teachers are in their demands for a new contract. And, you know, the district talking about their own budget deficits and things like that, you know, and the demands that they're making on that.
I hear you about the budget, and that's definitely something that needs to be tackled. But we also need, well, I shouldn't say, but we also, ideally, we also need to have a situation where the wrongdoings of OPD doesn't come out of our budget. That's 2. And
that's
3,
right.
we're in a situation where one might argue the police aren't policing. And how do you enforce that? You know, if you go down, for example, on Lakeshore, you will see a car sitting there. And meanwhile, somebody's up the block bashing in windows and taking people's stuff while the car is just sitting there. And you're going, well, why are you just sitting there? What's your purpose at this point, right? We knew this was going on in San Francisco because they were so upset with Chesa, they just stopped policing. And so that's a big problem one has to deal with, where it's basically, there's a nod and a wink, and it's like, have at it. Do whatever you want. And then you have powerful entities, in my opinion, that are basically funding, because, you know, when you steal these converters and these electronics and what have you, they get fenced off somewhere. And so what's the progress on dealing with those bad apples, those bad actors? So I think, you know, those are some questions that need to be addressed and answered, because, again, I think on the activist side, people, kind of prepared themselves mentally for that situation, but the average person has not and may not want to. And that needs to be a conversation that is had. So at the very least, they know what levers to push. So when they're sitting there going, you know, how can you send a sergeant, not one, but two sergeants down to look at, you know, somebody who didn't report a car accident, but you can't get somebody to show up to your house that just got robbed. You got to do it online, right? So that discrepancy means that we need to, one, find out who's doing these crimes. Are they from the town? Are they out of town? Are they repeat offenders? Is it a small group of people? Is it a large number of people? What's the progress on the cases that people have, you know, submitted? What are you looking at? Who are you looking for? What's the steps that you're taking to find these people? All those things need to be answered because, again, our money needs to show results in the same way that we all have to show results with our jobs. And I just don't think they should be given a pass as an organization where nobody's asking those questions and holding and demanding that we get some answers for the progress. Even to the point that, you know, for example, if there's a sideshow going on Grand Avenue, we should be able to look at logs and go, well, where were the police that night? What were they doing? You know, were they, you know, where were they stationed at? You know, because people will go, well, why are they here and there's no cops? Well, then we need to know what they were doing. And were they addressing some other, you know, situations? Were they showing up 10 people, you know, 10 squad cars to get the tree? Or were they, you know, effectively and efficiently using their resources? Those are questions that need to be answered, you know, in the long run. And I don't know who can answer.
Well, I think that I think the police commission should be asking those questions, and I think there's some issues there that that really need to be addressed. And we don't have a lot of time to really dive into that piece, but you know, because we're coming up on our time. But that I definitely think those are questions that we have to come back to, right? Because community and our, you know, a lot of the organizations that are doing organizing in our communities that are part of the social justice movement here in Oakland and the progressive movement in Oakland are really talking about like structural pieces that we really need. And I think what you're asking, Davey, is really about like the day-to-day, what will help address the situation that folks are faced with in our communities, like, you know, Officer Chung sitting as the, you know, getting paid massive amount of overtime, right? That's not part of OPD's budget. That's coming out of our general fund, right? When I think about $250,000 that went to him in overtime, and then he behaved this way, and we still have crime, we still have attacks, we still have that going on in Chinatown. To me, it's not working. So what does it look like that we can, like, for me, I'm like, let's tear this whole situation down. But in the interim, what are the ways that we can hold folks accountable? And I think, you know, we saw one step in that with the firing of the chief. But you're definitely right, Debbie. That doesn't solve all of our problems. It definitely opens up another bag of worms in terms of what we need to do next. But I want to thank you, Davey. I appreciate you taking time. I know that you're driving home from teaching at San Francisco State. So appreciate you hopping on with those really provocative and thought-provoking, you know, questions and the information that you give. And Deanne, for joining us and all the work that you all are doing in Chinatown and, you know, to bring safety in our communities. And to George Galvis, who joined us earlier, but had to hop off, and all the work that they're doing there. So props to them. Props to all the folks that are working on the budget. Tap in next week around the OEA demands that are coming and get a little brief on like what's happening with all the drama at the school board. And then the week after we'll be talking about the people's budget and what's coming next with that. So appreciate you. If you really enjoy these, you can support us at oaklandrising.org/donate. You can also just follow us on all of our platforms, because this is one way that we can really interact with you all and get, talk about what's happening in the town. So appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Davey.
Have
Bye,
a good one.
Deanne. Have
Bye-bye.
a great day.
Bye.